Hey, what's going on, everybody? Oh man, the audio in here is not good at all. Sorry about that. So, in this video, I'm going to talk to you briefly about an issue that I ran into last week with an application that was built for one of my clients over a year ago. So, the website was working perfectly, more or less, for the longest time. It's an e-commerce website. Hundreds of people go through it to buy tickets for tours to like Alcatraz in San Francisco, things like that. And at one point, it just stopped working. The mailer that was supposed to go out, one of the mailers that was supposed to go out automatically, stopped sending emails, and the inventory and the times for the inventory were getting all screwed up. And so it's just like, man, what the heck is going on? So we kind of briefly debugged it. We couldn't figure it out. We got in touch with the server, the people that are hosting the application, and they weren't very helpful. And so we came back to debug it, and I tried. There's two developers, myself and another developer that I brought on, and he did most of the heavy lifting with the PHP stuff because we used PHP in a framework called Laravel Laravel to create the overall website. And then I did a lot of styling. We did some client JS, stuff like that. So between his and I communication, we thought we had figured it out. And so I tried some stuff, and the stuff that I tried really screwed things up. I mean, they were already screwed up, but I screwed them up way more. And so back and forth over the course of a couple of days of just working nonstop, we were able to finally, hopefully, remedy the issue. We think it's fixed. It's kind of one of those like time will tell sort of things. But right now, with the current tests that we have on it, it looks like it's working. Whew! It took a long time, pretty stressful, frustrating, lots of kind of banging your head against the wall moments, just wondering why things weren't working, why certain things were happening the way they were happening. But so that all is super common in web development, but some of the takeaways from it are what I want to share. So some of the lessons learned: first and foremost, always have a backup of your data. So the server that we were using, we didn't realize it, but the database was not backed up. So we had the current existing screwed up data to work from, and we enabled backups, but it started from the point that we enabled it on, and it moved forward from there. So we just had a bunch of screwed up data. So we had to fix all the data manually, which was a huge headache. And yeah, it was just, the whole thing was just an insane debacle. So first and foremost, make sure that you always back up your data. If you're using Heroku, or I guess with Heroku, you'd be using like imlab if you're using MongoDB or some other. Actually, Heroku does host databases if you're using Postgres. The point being, make sure you have backups, whether you do it manually or you have a script that runs it automatically every day. Just make backups as often as possible. And hopefully it's an automatic process and you have those stored somewhere. So backups of your code are good. You should already have that. We had all that locally, and of course in our repo that we're using on GitLab. But make sure that you always have backups of your data. Okay, super important, back up your data, especially when you're dealing with something like e-commerce, where the moment the site goes down, the client starts losing a lot of money, which is no good, because then they have to pay you even more money to fix it. It's just a huge headache for them and for everybody. So back up your data. That's really the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway. If we had a backup of data, it would have been so much easier to at least patch that part of it. Now, we still had to fix code, and that took some time to debug and figure out what was going on. And the issue on a broader scope was that the time zones were off. So like the server was using a certain time zone, and then we had some code in our view layer that was using a time zone, and then the controller layer was using a different time zone, and then the client was in a different time zone. So we have all these different time zones between like UTC and where the client is in California, and it was just the logic that was in some of the code was throwing things off because of that. Why it didn't work? Well, okay, so we figured out why it worked for a long time and then it stopped working. It's because of an edge case. So that's the other thing. If you have the time, then obviously you'd be able to test every possible edge case for your application, and there would be no edge cases, and it'd be a perfect world, and you'd have no problems with any of the applications that you deploy for your clients. Well, in our case, obviously you can't foresee all the edge cases. So we didn't know that the client was going to do A and B when they're trying to work on their inventory, and the A and B would mess up C. And so it was one of those things where we just kind of had to hold our breath and wait for it to happen if it's going to happen. And when it did happen, then figure it out from there. And so that goes back to my first piece of advice, which is just back up the data. If we had a backup of the data, it would have been really easy to patch it back together and then debug the code. But in this case, we were doing two things at once. We were trying to fix the data and fix the code. And we would like fix the code, or at least think we fixed it, and then it would mess up the data again. And then the data we had already fixed, so now it's messed up a second time. Fortunately, at that point, I'd already learned my lesson, and I had backed up the data that we had fixed. So I was able to just keep recycling the fixed data. So all that's kind of broad in terms of like what actually happened with the application, because it would just take forever for me to explain it or go through it with code, and I can't really do that because it's not my code, it's for the client. But the big takeaway is, one, I've said it probably like 20 times now, back up your data, back up your data, back up your data. Two, communication with the other developers on the team is super helpful. If I had communicated better, then we probably would have saved a lot of man hours, because I spent a lot of time debugging it on my own. And I debugged it because I didn't have certain knowledge that I could have had if I had just asked the right questions of other people on the team. So communication between you and your team members is crucial. And the other thing is, like, if you're running into a problem and you're just like banging your head against the wall trying to solve it, don't spend endless hours trying to solve it that way. Like, know when to take breaks. I have another video that talks about the Pomodoro technique. Use that. But just know when to step away and clear your head. Maybe sleep on it, wake up the next day, come back to it, see if you can fix it then. This took multiple days to fix, so we're able to sleep on it a couple of times. But yeah, it's just a crazy thing that happens when you're dealing with real world applications that are live on the internet, and then something breaks because the internet's always changing, or there's just all these different variables that come into play. You know, the client does something in the dashboard that you created that you didn't expect them to do, and so the code wasn't made to handle that type of situation, and so it breaks things. So took a lot of patience and whatnot to get through, but I wasn't able to make any course videos for Code with Node last week, so I told everyone that I would make this video kind of talking about it. I know I've been like rambling, and we're going on 7 and almost 8 minutes. So I'm gonna leave you with that. Hopefully this was sort of helpful and you didn't just sit here watching me sit in front of my fire rambling about nothing. In terms of Code with Node, we're back on track. I just finished, well, I'm almost completely finished writing the feature that I'm gonna be making the video for, and that is adding a map to the index that shows markers for all the different posts. What happens if you have multiple posts at like the same address? Then it does marker clustering. And then what happens, so it tells you, like, let's say you have like 10 that are all in one area. When you're zoomed out, it shows 10. You click on it, it keeps zooming in. And clustering will actually include markers for a large area. So like if you have San Francisco and you're zoomed way out and you can see all of like the United States, it'll say like 30 on San Francisco. And then you click on 30, it'll zoom in, and then it'll kind of separate them as you start getting closer. It'll say 5 here, 6 here, and so on. And then when you click those, finally when you get down to the actual marker where the location is, there's something called spidering. You click on it and it'll just create this web of all the different markers so that you can click the individual posts for that multiple post location, a location with multiple posts that are all in the same location. So anyways, that's what I've been working on today. I also have a search feature on there, so you can just type in, Dallas, Texas, and it'll zoom the map over to Dallas and show you all the markers that are there. So we'll have those lectures up over the next couple of days. And yep, that's it. Just this quick update. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.